No, mirrors are not a paranormal portal to a dark dimension. They're mirrors. They reflect light. The issue is when you think you're looking into a mirror that isn't really there. The mirrors in your home, probably fine. Dirty mirrors with smudges on them, probably fine. Mirror on a wall where you know what's on the other side, definitely fine. But if you see a clean mirror in public, on a wall that looks like you can't get behind it, stay away from it. Do not look at the thing pretending to be you. That is not you. I can't say for certain who is orchestrating this, nor do I know why businesses and public bathrooms are agreeing to it. But more and more establishments are building identical bathrooms next to existing ones. I know this because I'm one of the contractors who keeps being hired for this. I have built 3 bathrooms so far, each of which we were told to pay meticulous attention to detail and to build an exact mirror image of an existing bathroom. At first, it didn't seem too strange. The places just needed space for more toilets. Perhaps they were getting a lot of customers. The first job was a generic public restroom in my local town center. The second job was in a restaurant a couple of miles away. The third was for the university of a neighboring city. The fact that each of these separate and very different locations had the exact same request was unsettling, but it was money. Why wouldn't we accept? A few days into the third contract, I was in my local town center, purchasing some supplies for the job. I needed to use the bathroom, so I made my way to the public ones. They're a little hidden through an alleyway, the type you definitely wouldn't use at night. When I got there, I noticed that the bathroom I had helped build was simply not there. They had filled the doorway back in with bricks and cement, as if it was never there. I figured they had realized that having 2 identical bathrooms was silly. They had probably got some people to knock down the shared wall between them to turn it into one larger bathroom facility. But no. Once I was standing inside, it was the exact same size as before. The shared wall, the one with the mirrors across, was still there. They had hardly even cleaned up the place. It was all as filthy as ever. All except for the mirror. The mirror was crystal clear. It didn't make sense. This would indicate a terrible, terrible job had been done. However, we had been paid on time and didn't receive any complaints. As far as my team and I are aware, we did everything perfectly fine. I couldn't understand why they would hide it away. But it wasn't my job to understand. We got paid, and it's up to the client what they do with the work once we leave. We collect 50% of the payment up front, and the other 50% when completed. Once we were done with the third contract, we had to chase up with the restaurant. They still had not paid us the second half, and hadn't even been in contact to tell us why. I made my way down the same day we completed the university bathroom. The restaurant wasn't too busy, as it's not a very popular place. I had been surprised when they needed double the bathroom capacity. As I made my way up to the counter, I noticed that the new restroom we had built was not labeled as such. The door was still there. They had not hidden it like the public restroom. But the sign on it read, "Supply Closet. Staff only." Nobody was at the counter yet. No staff were in sight. Just 2 customers who weren't even paying me any attention. So I pushed the door gently open. And it was not a supply closet. It was the bathroom we had built. I stepped in slowly. Something about the whole situation felt odd. This was the second place trying to hide our work. As I stepped into the center of the room and looked towards the mirror, I noticed no reflection. I stepped slowly towards the sinks and stood in front of them, staring. It was as if I was waiting to see myself, but I wasn't there. I reached out, and my hand went right through. There was no mirror here at all. This was a cutout into the next room. For some reason, I felt I had to prove that to myself. As I climbed through into the original bathroom and stood facing away from the mirror, my only explanation was, again, perhaps they decided to knock down the shared wall to simply expand the room. I figured they must only be halfway finished. This explanation was short-lived, as I turned back around and saw my reflection looking back at me. By this point, confused was an understatement. I wasn't scared either. I was unsettled. But more than anything, I just didn't understand what was going on. I reached out, and sure enough, my hand met my reflection. At this point, I began to wonder whether the mirror was slide away for any reason, like a secret passage between the rooms. That was until I realized my hand hadn't felt the cold touch of a mirror's surface, but the warm and soft feeling of another person's hand. My face dropped. My eyes glazed over with fear. I didn't know how terrified I looked, because my reflection had stopped copying me. He smiled. His hand clasped around mine as I tried to pull away. Our fingers were interlocked as he began to slowly climb through. I truly think I'd have been done for had it not been for the door swinging open at that point.
"Oh, hey, I thought I saw you come in. You're here because we didn't pay you the other half, right?"
My reflection returned to normal, and I backed away from the mirror. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I couldn't take my gaze off myself.
"You like the mirror?"
I was able to look at him as he continued to speak to me.
"We didn't want the new bathroom. I can't really get into the details about why we got it. We were forced to, and threatened by a third party. They even gave us the money to pay you. Maybe it's some legal loophole for them to get a tax write-off or something. I won't pretend to understand it."
I was able to find words somewhere in my head. "So, you have the money?"
"Well, that's the thing. We were already in debt. Business hasn't been great. We spent it all. But we will get you the money, I promise."
"It's okay. Keep it." I walked out of there without turning back, despite being pretty sure I could hear the manager shouting to me. I do not believe these things in the mirrors to be human. I don't know how. I don't know why. But someone is trying extremely hard to allow these things to mimic us without being noticed. Right there, in front of your eyes, something pretending to be you, and you wouldn't even bat an eye. For whatever reason, it is important that they be allowed to copy people, and this is the best that they could come up with. So next time you find yourself in front of a spotlessly clean mirror, don't touch it. They don't like to be noticed. I've been packing boxes for the past few days, moving out of my parents' place and into my own. Admittedly, there wasn't a ton to do. I'm trying to furnish a whole apartment with a bedroom's worth of stuff. It's strange how it can seem like you own so many things, until you move to a larger space. Suddenly, all of the things that spent years next to each other have a whole new open area to be spread across. There was one box that was nearly forgotten, because it wasn't a newly packed box. It was a box packed by my parents years ago. The one almost everyone has, and has to make a decision at some point about whether to keep it. The box of your childhood things. If my dad hadn't remembered, it would have sat up in the attic for another few years. I wonder what we would have thought as kids, peering into the future, knowing that all our favorite things end up collecting dust, and only ever thought about when you move house. It's a curious thought. I took the box to my new apartment and began sorting through it. I decided to get it out of the way first, as it was the only box I wasn't sure of the contents. I didn't know how much I'd be keeping, throwing away, or donating. Putting everything into 3 piles was difficult and emotional, but I was able to make a decision for most things. To say it opened a gateway back into my childhood would be wrong, as it didn't. A gateway would imply I could walk through and live it again. What it provided was a window, one which I could only look through and never open. But what a beautiful, crystal clear window it provided. Sorting through that box was one of the happiest moments of the past few years, until I got to the end. Perhaps the reason I'm focusing so much on happiness is that I'm afraid to continue this story. The final item in the box was a diary. My diary. It was pink and shiny. Cliché, but all the TV shows had this sort of thing in them, so it's what I wanted as a kid. I never stuck to many things in my childhood, and this was no different. I used it for about a half a year, and even then I missed about half of the days. So even after 6 months, it would have only had about 100 entries. I sat there and read every single one, each dated about 10 years ago, and each one making me happier. But the smile dropped from my face when the dates crossed a threshold of impossibility.
2 years ago.
Dear Diary, I totally forgot about this. My dad got a new job recently and had to store some of his old work stuff in the attic. I helped and found this whilst up there. Reading through the old entries was enchanting, to say the least. Maybe I'll come back sometimes and write more. Alicia. My handwriting. But I hadn't been up here 2 years ago. My dad didn't get a new job 2 years ago. It didn't make sense. I wasn't exactly scared at that point. I didn't know what to think. I was just confused. And so I read on.
1 year ago.
Dear Diary, this again. Although I don't remember writing that last year, how strange. Was still cool to read through all this, though. I've just moved out and found this in a box of old stuff. Good job my dad reminded me about it. I'm hoping that living alone isn't as scary as it seems. I suppose only time will tell. Future me, you got this. Alicia. How could this be dated a year ago? This all happened, but it happened the same day I had read it, and I certainly never wrote it.
6 months ago.
I'm not doing this diary shit. What the hell is this? I've never had a diary in my entire life. How does this thing know everything that has happened to me as a kid? At this point, I started to freak out. This entry wasn't like the others. It wasn't just confusing for me, but clearly whoever wrote it was also confused and concerned. Except they still seemed to think they're me. The next one changed that.
4 months ago.
How odd. This entire journal perfectly describes my life. Up until a couple of years ago. I'm moving out in a few months. I haven't already moved out. But all of the entries as a child perfectly mimic my life. Except for one crucial detail. My name is Rebecca. How on earth could this be?
The next one was the worst.
2 months ago. Dear Diary, someone just broke in. I'm hiding in the attic, and I found my childhood diary. I've called the police, but I'm scared. I just need to take my mind away from this. The police wanted me to stay on the phone, but I was afraid of making noise. I can hear them downstairs. I hope I get to read this again soon. Writing this makes me feel like I'm going to be okay. It turns this into a memory, and not a final day. I wish I had the time to read the past entries, but I don't. I promise I will soon. I just hope that I manage to.
The entry ended there. It's covered in dry blood. At this point, I was physically shaking, but I felt like I had the duty to continue this, and so I did. I took out a pen and wrote, Dear Diary, I don't know what this thing is. Will I remember writing this? What kind of power this book has is beyond me, but whatever is going on, I don't like it. I died? I moved out a year ago. My dad got a new job 2 years ago. My name is Rebecca. None of it makes any sense. My pen ran out of ink, and so I went looking for another one. I intended to finish the entry, but when I returned, the journal was gone. I wonder where it went. There is a house that I spent a good portion of my childhood in, and the house that I, to this day, although no longer living in it, will always call my true home. I have many fond childhood memories in that house, and it's where our family lived the longest. What I'm about to describe are all real events experienced in this house by me and the rest of my family. These are true accounts, and are not exaggerated in any way. We've always known that house was haunted, not to the point of being insane and deadly, like you see in the movies, but plenty of unnerving things have happened there. Let me start by telling you a little bit about the house. The first thing you should know is it's very old. From the 1800s, it used to be a hotel. When my family bought it, I, being the youngest, was only a little kid. We remodeled that house, and even extended it a little. It took a very long time, but eventually, that old, rickety house from the 1800s got a brand new, modern makeover. However, the things lingering in that house which we couldn't see stayed. At first, it started out with smaller things. My older brother would occasionally be falling asleep in his room upstairs, which was always cold, and someone would blow in his ear. He would open his eyes and look, but of course, nobody would be there. We were told by a few different people that a cranky old woman used to live there, who would sit out rocking on her rocking chair on the balcony, which we removed, yelling at people who would walk by. There was one night during which one of my older sisters was sleeping on the couch in the living room, and she started hearing a creaking sound. She described it as wood, creaking rhythmically, coming from the spot just outside one of the upstairs windows, which used to be a door that led out to the balcony that no longer exists. One time when I was little, being all adventurous like I was,
I took a digital camera up to the furnished attic at night, where it was quiet and pitch black. I made my way into the middle of the room, held up the camera, and started snapping pictures. I could only see what I was taking pictures of when the camera would flash, and then afterwards when I looked at the taken picture on the digital screen. I eventually saw in one of the pictures I had taken while I was facing a wall, a small black spot in the middle of the screen. I took another picture, pointing the same way, and saw the spot was still there, but had grown. To me, it looked like some sort of portal to nothingness, a small void of blackness in the room, something that sucked up the light of the flash and didn't reflect any back. As I took more and more pictures of it, it got bigger and bigger, until it was almost covering the entire camera lens. Just blackness. It then occurred to me that rather than growing, this black mass actually seemed to be getting closer and closer to the camera lens. I don't remember anything past that point. I must have run downstairs. Things started getting more physical. I was once in the shower when the water suddenly got cold, and I looked back to find the knob had been turned significantly behind my back. At night, when alone, we each began to hear loud footsteps above us in the biggest room on the second floor. You would only ever hear them if you were alone or were the only one awake. Once, they were so heavy, it sounded like there was an elephant or something up there, and the ceiling cracked so loud that I half expected it to cave in on me. My sisters shared that room for a long time. Eventually, one of them moved out. Only one remained in it. When she was walking around up there, you could hear her footsteps clearly. The only problem was, I would also hear those footsteps walking around when she wasn't home. Sometimes, I was home alone. My mom was awakened one night when my friend was sleeping over to loud footsteps running up and down the stairs. According to her, it sounded like more than one person, and was practically a stampede. She jumped out of bed, angry at us for being up so late, causing such a racket, opened her bedroom door into the room where you can see the bottom of the stairs, but there was only dead silence and darkness. Everything was still. She thought we must have run upstairs, and she had just missed us. So she went up the stairs and opened the door to the room we were sleeping in, which was my sister's old room, now vacant after they had both moved out. But we were sound asleep. She thought maybe we were faking it, and inspected us closer, and realized that, no, we were clearly out cold, and had been that way for quite a while. She mentioned all this to us the next day, maybe still wanting to think that it was us. But we, of course, had no idea what she was talking about. One night, I was just about to fall asleep when I heard a man's voice, right in my face, whisper the word, "Bang." It pulled me out of my sleep, making my eyes shoot open and look around in the dark room to find nothing. After a minute, still being tired, I brushed it off and closed my eyes again. I started to drift back to sleep when the voice once again quietly whispered, "Bang," in my face again. I opened my eyes again to once again find nothing. This happened a total of 3 times before I was finally able to fall asleep. So many things happened in that house, but after so many years of constant activity, you get used to it, and things that used to frighten you begin to simply annoy you. Sometimes, if you were alone and there was a persistent noise being made where no other person was, like the squeezing and popping sound of plastic water bottles in the kitchen, you could simply look in that direction and say, "Stop it." And sometimes it would just stop. We were eventually able to get the things that were dwelling in that house out, and the activity, after years of persistence, stopped altogether. As I said earlier, I still consider that house my one and only true home, and I always will. I spent years growing up there as a child with my family, and 2 of my close friends, as well as family friends. Despite the occasional paranormal activity, I have many good memories of that place. It is where my mind will always wander back to whenever I think home.